So I was at the Morgan Autism Center, another incredible, great small I institution, a couple months ago, and one of the moms, we were talking about the conference, and one of the moms said, I just want to know about money. I want to know how to get whatever I can. She has a very, very severely disabled daughter who will require 24/7 care for the rest of her life. And she wants to know money, how can I maximize every opportunity to get income for her daughter who will never be able to provide for herself and will always require intensive, expensive services. So inspired by this mom, we have our opening panel all about that topic, which is about money. We have, you guys can say more about yourself. Steve Dale, an attorney, will be talking about public benefits. Jon Elfin will be talking about kind of private management and financial planning of kind of private resources. And then Christina Elliott from Sacramento, thank you for coming in. The executive director of CalABLE will end talking about ABLE accounts. Take it away.
Okay, let's try to do this without hurting myself. Okay, anyway, my name's Steve Dale. I'm going to go through about 25 minutes on public benefits, and this is, I'm going to cover a lot of material. Assuming that all the information was uploaded, there is a link to my YouTube channel, and so you can actually watch this over and over and over again. I think I have 212 hours of YouTube material there. A lot of it on the ABLE Act. We're going to really have a treat here learning about something new. Doing the obligatory because I am an attorney and therefore I am full of myself. Let me tell you a little bit about my background. I actually, this conference itself is really exciting for me because I actually come from 3 generations of institutional workers with a big I. Actually grew up part of my life on the grounds of Agnew State Hospital. I worked for 17 years as a psych nurse. I actually worked in the Northern California Autism Program. We had 100, that was probably 1971. We had 100 patients. I was told that was the entire population of Northern California. Obviously, there was something wrong with that. I became an advocate. Believe it or not, I had some wonderful things that happened in the institutions, but it's hard to believe there were some bad things that happened in the institutions, and I became an attorney to shut down what I considered abusive institutions here, and that's how I got involved in this. So, once again, oddly enough, I could never have conceived when I was a child walking around the grounds of Agnew's Hospital of something like this, and this is really incredible, and it is because of the families and the parents and all that. So let's go through this, and there's kind of a theme as we go through this. I'm going to go through public benefits. Part of what I want to talk about is not just about public benefits, and it's really fitting that Jim Hike here is going to be talking after this because he'll add a little bit more to this. Part of what I want to do as I go through this is talk about public benefits, but also talk about the price of being on public benefits. Autism obviously is a spectrum, so everybody's on a different path, and so in many cases, benefits will be important. They may be important at different times in one's life, and they may eventually not be important at all. So that's part of what happens. So anyway, and by the way, this is a lot of this is from, and don't you hate people that are always pushing a book, but this comes from my book called Achieving Independence. There is material out there about it, but this is from the chapter in the book. So let's start off with this, and this shouldn't be hard for some of you. I introduce Kathy to almost everything I do. So let's assume that Kathy has autism, and let's see if you can imagine. Imagine that you have a 17-year-old daughter named Kathy, and imagine that she has autism. Now, how many people have a 17-year-old daughter with autism? Okay, so I'll be talking to you, okay? Whatever that is. Let's say she has a disability and she's going to need some assistance for the rest of her life. Now, as we all know, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And we have a habit of, I know when I was with the autism program, they wanted to, they like to focus on savants and do, they're individuals, right? And so everybody's different here. But let's say that we know that she's going to need a certain level of attention for the rest of her life. And let's say that she's going to have a normal lifespan. To my knowledge, and maybe somebody can correct me, I don't think anybody's died of autism, okay? In fact, I think there's a lot of it. So here's our focus, really, for those of us that are working, not just on this panel, but on other programs here. Here's our quest. Let's say you come into the Clever Attorney, you want to get one of these special needs trust things done because you were told it was important, and you want to take care of your child. if you passed away, as if you're going to get out of this thing alive here, to make sure that your child is going to have a quality of life. And we should be focusing on quality of life, not welfare programs for the rest of her life. So here's the things we're going to have to deal with. We don't know what public benefits are going to be available for the next 70 years. So as I go through my little 20-minute thing on the basics of public benefits and SSI and all that, how many people think that SSI rules will stay the same for the next 70 years? 7 months, right? I mean, we have no idea. So if I do a trust and if all I focus on is keeping your kid on a welfare program, as far as the rules are in 2016, did I do my job? And the answer is absolutely not. I better make sure that that's flexible. And as we talk about trustees later, we better have somebody who can adjust to the rules as time goes on. We don't know what agencies are going to be out there. Jim and I were talking about this. We're fortunate in California to be the only state with entitlements here. I will tell you, a lot of the programs are slowly going away. We're the only state that doesn't have waiting lists. And I just got back from Colorado, which was a tour of waiting lists, okay? Are we going to have waiting lists? I hope not. Very possible it will someday. We don't know what the best trustee is. And we're going to talk about a panel later about, I will tell you, after doing this for 25 years, the choice of trustee is the single greatest issue about whether these trusts work or don't work, okay? Can I name a trustee can take care of Kathy for the next 70 years? And the answer is absolutely not, right? So we better be flexible. So let's go through a very fast presentation on public benefits, okay? And I want you to get a flavor of this. So first off, by the way, I hate needs-based benefits. I hate welfare programs. How did this happen? Okay, because in the deinstitutionalization process, which really started somewhere in the 60s, I don't remember the promise that we're going to take people out of institutions and put them all on welfare programs. Jim's going to cover a lot of this, and the fact is Jim and I have worked with some fabulously wealthy people who swore they are not going to put their kids on Medi-Cal. What did we do? We put them on Medi-Cal, and there's some darn good reasons for it. Hopefully, as advocates, we're going to change this. Going through this really quickly, there's two types of public benefits we're taking. One is what are called needs-based benefits here, and that's where I'm going to focus a lot today. The other ones are what are called entitlements, okay? And so what I want to do is kind of walk you through this, and for many folks in this room, you're going to switch eventually from needs-based to entitlements. And so it's important to understand the rules as they are today. So another way to look at this is our cash program, and where I'm going to spend a lot of my time is going over SSI, Supplemental Security Income. With the Supplemental Security Income, and as I like to say, we want to put a price on the public benefits. It's not the SSI usually that's most important, it's the Medi-Cal or Medicaid that comes with it. Once again, many of you here, your children will eventually be on a program called Childhood Disability Benefits, and with that, eventually they will be on Medicare. For many of you in this room, your children will one day be on a variety of these different programs, and sometimes navigating through this is a bit much. So, what is SSI? SSI is a federal program administered by the states, and it's based on showing a sufficient evidence of disability and financial need, okay? Now, it's intended to pay for food, clothing we don't count any longer, and shelter, and nothing more. And for $889.40, your child is supposed to pay for their food, clothing, and shelter in Palo Alto, California. Okay, now, even if you're watching this in Bakersfield, and I love Bakersfield, okay, this is going to be a challenge, okay? I mean, how you're going to do this, and I mean, it's so absurd. Here that our public benefit laws are so out of date. And this is one of the reasons that providing funds or setting aside of funds for a person with a disability is so important no matter what tool you use. The federal government thinks that your child can pay for their food, clothing, and shelter for $889.40. Good luck with that. Okay, so as we kind of go through the benefits programs, and I knew this wasn't going to last long, here, it's a three-part test. And I'm going to go through the three-part test. The first test is you have to meet the definition of disability. I'm going to go through that in a fair amount of detail. And Then there's an income test that determines how much you receive, and a resource test that determines eligibility. So let's go through this. What is disability? Now, merely having a diagnosis of autism, Down syndrome, whatever it is, doesn't get you the benefits. It's a functional test. And I'll tell you, as advocates and parents, and I have a granddaughter who is in the spectrum as well. So here, we always brag about our kids, about how much they could do and how functional they are. When you go meet the Social Security worker, this is not the time to be bragging on all the wonderful things your kid could do. It's not based on a diagnosis. It's based on whether or not you're able to earn $1,170 a month here, based on a disability that's likely to last a year or longer or end in death. You hear all the time that everybody gets turned down the first time they apply for benefits. Usually it's because they're too focused on the diagnosis. It's a functional test, okay? So now, if you are blind, the number is 1950. Anybody know why the blind get more? And here's the answer, and this is where advocacy is important. When they put these laws in place, they had better lobbyists than everybody else, okay? There is a politic to this. I wish there wasn't, but there is, okay? So let's focus a little bit more on the income test, okay? And I'm going to assume we're all here to try as best we can to provide the best quality of life for a disabled loved one as possible, not the old I institution, large institution, I like that term here, that I was grown up in, where the job was just to keep them alive here. The whole thing about moving in the community is not just physically moving in the community, it's being part of the community, and it's really focusing on quality of life. So the next thing we're going to talk about here is the income test, which determines how much you receive. So let's go through this. On SSI, okay, and once again, there's a little bit of a game changer, and I'm excited that Christina is here to talk about this today, is that under the current rules, here, any income, any cash you give a person on SSI, Medi-Cal, IHSS related programs will reduce your benefits dollar for dollar. So when I was a nurse, I spent an enormous amount of time teaching my patients, they were patients, here, how to make change for $1, and now I put together trusts to make sure that they can't get their grubby little hands on this money, because the problem is, if you give them cash directly, it will reduce their benefits dollar for dollar. Now, the problem with this is that we want to teach them how to be independent, and how are we going to teach them to be independent if they can't have cash, okay? Earned income, and if I was going to add another session to this conference, because really what we need is more sessions, don't you think? Here is I would have a session on workability. Anytime you hear that a person with a disability shouldn't work, 90% of the time that is just dead wrong. But if you earn it, you lose $1 for every $2 you earn after the first $65. Now, because I can't spend a lot of time on this here, I wanted to send you to a website, so I'll give you the long name, and if you're able to write it down, write down the short name. DisabilityBenefits101.org is a wonderful website that talks about workability issues. The short name is DB101.org. It has all sorts of wonderful programs where people can work. My feeling is if you can work, you should get a job, okay? And if I can turn my beneficiary into a taxpayer, I'm okay with that. Here's the hardest thing to deal with, okay, which is in-kind support and maintenance. Okay, so what this is SSI is for food, clothing we don't count any longer, and shelter. And so the problem you run into is if your child on their $889.40, let's say they're living in your house, okay, and they're over 18. If they're living in your house and they're unable to pay fair market rent for housing in your house, Social Security will reduce their benefits by $264.34. Why? Because the federal part of the SSI is literally 1/3 for food, 1/3 for clothing, and 1/3 for shelter. What is the biggest issue that my office deals with is housing. It is housing, 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 okay? And you would think that you would get a credit or something or a pat on the back for helping provide that, and you're relieving the taxpayer when you're doing that, Under our current rules, and I would love to see this go away, if you pay for food or shelter, your benefits will be reduced by $264.34. One exciting thing when you can tie it into an ABLE account is there is a clever way around this. And on my YouTube channel, and I'm sure Christina will cover this here, there is a very clever way to get around this. So let's go through this. Let's go through the last test, which is the resource test. What is a resource? Anything you can convert into cash for support is a resource. And if your resources exceed $2,000 on the first moment of the first day of the calendar month, you are no longer eligible for benefits, okay? So here's the thing that happens here is that, and this was set in 1989, okay? If it had even the slightest cost of living increase here, it should be somewhere around $18,000, but that's not what's going on right now. 2,000 is a ridiculous number here. But anything over that you will lose your eligibility for benefits. Now, there's some exceptions, and we'll do this real fast. A person on SSI can own a residence that they live in of any value. Once again, on my YouTube channel, one of the most popular videos is on housing. I would suggest to you that in most cases, it's not a good idea to give a child with serious challenges a home. But on the other hand, they can own a residence in their own name here and still keep their SSI of any value. In that house, they can put all the junk in it they want. They can have all the big screen TV sets and all of that here, and that changed in 2005. But items held for their value aren't going to work. Okay, they can have one automobile of any value. They can have items related to their disability. That kind of makes sense here. Maybe you can ask John when he comes up here if he can do this. This is the one I like. They can own, this is what they can own. They can own a life insurance policy with the cash surrender value of no more than $1,500. Now, I think if you had a financial advisor who sold you something like that, that would probably be a trip to the commissioner's office. But although maybe John could do this. We'll just see. If he can, that's clever. Once again, these numbers are way out of whack. They can own any amount of term insurance in their own name because, once again, it doesn't have a value until your trust matures in our office here. They can, you are to live in poverty, but you can die in dignity. You can own a burial plot of any value. Cool here. But you can only set aside $1,500 of your own money to get into the plot. Now, if you have priced the market, that will get you about a third of the way there, okay? And so these numbers are out of whack. Now, here's the thing, and I'm going to go through this very quickly because I'm sure that Jim's going to cover a lot of the real practical part of Medi-Cal here. But one of the reasons for doing this is if you get $1 of SSI, you get to keep your Medi-Cal without a share of cost. Now, if I had more time, but I'm sure Jim will cover this, for some of you in this room, the loss of the Medi-Cal would be unthinkable. For some of you in this room, Medi-Cal is a nuisance and may actually be in the way of reaching your goal. And how are you going to determine that? Well, we don't have time to go through that, but we'll go through that later, okay? So here's the thing, just real quickly, because as I told you here, I'm not going to be able to go through the whole thing today. There are other ways to get Medi-Cal. So I've seen people go to crazy extremes to keep that last dollar of SSI. This is where having advisors to help you can really help, because for some folks, keeping the Medi-Cal is important. And what does it pay for? It pays for a lot of stuff, okay? And once again, I'm going to rely a lot. But for this group, a lot of times what we're really focused on is attendant care, regional center benefits and that kind of thing. And a lot of our programs, not all of them, are welfare-based, and some of the programs do really rely on having to have somebody qualify for Medi-Cal. Okay, last thing I'm going to cover, because I think I have 7 minutes left here, is Social Security disability. And there's two parts of this. One is for any of us that are contributing into the system, here, if we become disabled, and the definition is exactly the same as what I went through before, the inability to earn $1,170 based on a disability likely to last a year or longer or end in death, okay? So anyway, it's the same thing, and if you have enough quarters, into the system. If you become disabled, if you're unable to work, we have the Social Security Disability Insurance. And it's an entitlement, meaning that you could win the lottery and you're not going to lose eligibility for those benefits. So, but here's the program that many of you will be dealing with, and here's the thing I see people really focus on: we got to keep you on the SSI, I got to keep you on the SSI so that when I die or retire, my kid will keep their SSI. Here's a surprise. They're not going to, for many of you, your kids are not going to be on SSI. They're going to be on a program called Childhood Disability Benefits. So let me run through that really quick. You're not eligible until the parent dies, retires, or becomes disabled themselves. Okay, same definition. Social Security is not affected by the child's assets. So on these programs, if you're able to get by with these programs that I'm about to describe, there's no income or resource limitation here. And if you were doing a trust, you would want to make sure that the trust and the trustees can adjust to this fact so that they're not being overly restrictive when it's not necessary. So on childhood disability benefits, upon the disability or retirement of the parent, the disabled adult child will receive an amount equal to 1/2 of the parent's benefits. And by the way, I'm not sure if it's in the slides, but in this case, and we're just adding all sorts of numbers all over the place, you have to be disabled before the age of 22. Now for autism, that's probably not a problem, okay? So for this group, we can kind of gloss over this. Upon the death of the parent, the child will get 3/4 of what the parent would have been receiving. So let's do some math, and then I'll hand this over to Jonathan. Let's say that Helen has been disabled from birth and is receiving $889.40 a month in SSI. Helen's father, Earl, retires and receives $1,400 a month. Okay, now I'm a tax attorney, which means I can't count, but if we take $1,400 divided in half, that's $700. If we take that, because it's unearned income, and subtract it from the SSI, it's going to reduce the benefits by $680 because they don't count the first $20. What's going to happen is that she's now receiving $209 of SSI and $800 in childhood disability benefits. Well, you'd go, well, I'm not that excited about that. Well, let's just go a little further. Let's say Earl dies and Helen begins to get $1,050 a month. Helen's SSI is going to be completely eliminated. It's a good thing, okay? Anytime you can get somebody off of SSI, that is a good thing. Helen will lose her SSI like Medi-Cal, and she's going to need to qualify on another program. Jim, is that going to be hard? No. Okay, so here's the thing as we kind of go through this, is that one of this, and this is one of the reasons why having advisors who can walk you through this, because these rules, you know, as a tax attorney, I work with some, not all of my cases are large, but I work with very large tax cases. And I always, when I'm working with another tax professional, they always say the same thing. The taxes are a walk in the park compared to these crazy benefit rules. And sometimes getting your arms around this is kind of hard to do. Now, one of the things is that when you qualify for the childhood disability benefits here, you also qualify for Medicare. And so many of folks that we work with, your children eventually will be what are called Medi-Medi. They'll get Medicare and Medi-Cal. Persons can be eligible for both benefits, and Medi-Cal becomes the payer of last resort and covers long-term costs. You know, once again, as far as how valuable are the benefits, I would urge you to listen to what Jim's going to talk about, because I think what he's going to talk about is, in some cases, it's not a big thing. In some cases, losing it could be absolutely devastating. And sometimes having a professional that can help you and understands this is really going to be important. So anyway, I don't know how this happened, but I did finish on time here. So once again, the materials have been uploaded. I have a number of articles that I uploaded. I haven't checked to make sure they're there. But if you go to my website, which is achievingindependence.com, it'll take you to my YouTube channel. We have a lot of videos on a number of things. You know, I will tell you with this, just finishing up here, one of the reasons that groups like the Autism Society and all that are so important is that it really is advocacy. And we're going to go through a period here where advocacy, I think, is going to be more important than ever. I'm on the board of the ARC of California, and we have many programs right now that are quietly going away. You know, it's not like a big fanfare. as far as the hands about should we be disturbed, we should be really disturbed because the services that are here to provide for our children are slowly eroding as time goes on. And if you think everything is okie dokie, you are kidding yourself. I want to thank you very much.
Okay. All right, so yeah, my name's Jon Elfin. I'm a financial planner. These are my children, Jacob and Jessica. Jake is a special needs 21-year-old. He is not autistic. He's got a rare genetic condition called trisomy 9. But I just bring that up because I face the same issues that everybody in here faces and have gone through all the planning issues that I'm going to walk through. So what I'm going to talk about today is approach and process for planning for your special needs child and building wealth. Oh, I forgot I have this over here. Disposition of your assets after your death so that they maintain public benefits. How much do you need? It's a question I'm often asked. How much do you need to accumulate privately for your special needs child? And then talk about two ideas. One's life insurance and the other is the ABLE account, which I'll actually pass off to Christina. So building wealth for your special needs child begins with building wealth for yourself. And for anybody in here who took Psych 101, this is kind of a Maslow's hierarchy of needs, only for financial services. And generally, when you have a family with typically developing people, this is a pyramid that I use to sort of illustrate how you plan. And first, you start off with, are you okay? Are you on track for retirement? Do you have the right investment and tax strategy? Do you have the proper asset protection measures in place? And then once you're comfortable with that, then typically you go to the next level to make sure that your family is okay. Estate planning, college planning, and that type of thing. And then if you're comfortable with those things, very often you're interested in leaving a legacy or charitable planning. But what I have found with families that have special needs dependents is the first two levels generally meld into one another, and the planning you're doing for your special needs child is really just as important as what you're doing for yourself. And, you know, it's hard enough to plan for yourself with estate planning, retirement planning, asset protection, but when you fold in all the things that Stephen mentioned and Jill mentioned in terms of IPP, special needs trusts, conservatorship, the regional center, it can get overwhelming. And so I'm often asked, how do you deal with all those, juggling all those things, and how do you plan for all of that? And the only way I really know how to do that is through a structured planning process. And the planning process generally begins with being very clear about the goals for yourself and your special needs child, prioritizing those goals, auditing what you have to determine where your gaps and opportunities are, understand what your solutions are, and then implement those solutions. And this is going to cover, as I said, estate planning, retirement planning, investment strategy, if you're a business owner, business succession planning, and then there's always a tax overlay and risk management overlay as well, plus all the things we just talked about with your special needs child. And a process like this is typically going to take I've had up to 20 meetings, and invariably will include an estate planner like Stephen and even a benefits consultant like Jim and even a CPA. Once you go through this process, you want to update it every 1, 2, 3, or 1 or 2 years. And you know, the benefit for going through a process like this is you're just going to crystallize your objectives. You'll make informed decisions, and then probably most importantly, implement those decisions. It takes a lot of time, but you'll sleep better at night. So now I'm going to talk about very high level, because I also don't have a whole lot of time, but a very high level about some concepts in building wealth, but more importantly, how you pass those assets for the benefit of your special needs child and maintain public benefits. And when you look at this, what these different boxes are just different types of assets that people tend to have, and the different colors are assets that have similar characteristics. And I'm sure we've all heard the concept of diversification, and diversification is good because it minimizes risk. But another benefit of diversification is that assets with different characteristics give you flexibility. And I often liken somebody's financial situation to a financial table. And the more legs you have on that table, obviously the more steady the table will be. If one of the table legs gets chopped off, the table will still be standing. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Jill. And so let me ask you a question. Typically, what are the most valuable assets that people have? House and 401k or 403b. And the reason for that is why? Well, it's forced savings. After you pay for food, the first thing you're going to do is pay for your mortgage, and money going into a 401k comes right out of your paycheck. And those are wonderful assets. They both have tax benefits, and in the case of a home, there's leverage, so that's typically why a home has a lot of value. But if you have an emergency or you have an investment opportunity, are they good places to draw money from? No, because a 401k is very tax inefficient. If you'll have to pay income tax on any withdrawals, and if you're under 59 and a half, pay a 10% penalty, and a house is illiquid. So, it's a good idea to have, as an example, just a brokerage account or a savings account. It's boring. A savings account's boring. You're not going to make any money on it, particularly after inflation, but it's available, it's liquid, and it's tax efficient. So just a very high-level concept of investing. How do you pass these assets to your special needs child? And as you look at this diagram, on the right-hand side is life insurance, then qualified assets, which are your 401ks, IRAs, 403b, they're just tax qualified, and then your non-qualified assets. And let's start with the non-qualified. Non-qualified assets should pass down after your death by titling. And so ultimately, those assets will be titled in your in a revocable living trust or a family trust. And typically that family trust will then pass or instruct that money to be passed to a special needs trust. The same thing can be accomplished through a will, but it's not as efficient, and I think Stephen would agree that that's not generally the best way to do it. I have also LLC over here, so you might own some property, as an example, in an LLC, and the LLC should ultimately do the same thing, that is direct the money intended for your special needs child into the special needs trust. Often people own a business, and what I find most often is that that business will be passed on to the typically developing kids, not the special needs kids, but it is possible that it will be liquidated, and so the buy-sell agreement and life insurance also should direct anything intended for the special needs child to a special needs trust. One exception on the non-qualified side, or little nuance, is you can own an annuity on the non-qualified side, and that does not have to be owned by a revocable living trust. That can be owned by an individual, but that's passed by beneficiary. And so the beneficiary, again, should be the special needs trust. And just a note on beneficiaries, you can have multiple beneficiaries. So you can have a third going to child one, a third going to child two, and say a third going to the special needs trust. Moving on to the qualified side, these assets need to be held as an individual. It's the only way they can be held, in your name. They also pass by beneficiary. So again, the beneficiary should be the special needs trust. Word of caution, you want to work closely with your estate planning attorney on this, because there can be language in that special needs trust that will cause higher taxes. For example, if the remainder beneficiary or contingent beneficiary is an older child or a charity, again, that can cause higher taxes, so you want to do some good planning there. Lastly, life insurance, again, passes by beneficiary. So very simply, it can be owned in your name, but the beneficiary should be the special needs trust. Assets can also pass, so you can pass assets during your life to your special needs, or for the benefit of your special needs child, into a standalone special needs trust. And you can gift, it's actually gifting, so you can gift, or family members can gift $14,000 per year each into that special needs trust. If you're a high net worth individual, there's another lifetime gift exemption of $5,450,000. But that's more advanced planning, but just know that's there if you get to that place. And then, of course, you can also gift $14,000, but just once, or in total, $14,000 into an ABLE account, which Christina will talk about in a few minutes. So I know that was a lot, and that was a lot of detail. So here's sort of the bottom line and some rules to remember and mistakes you want to avoid. Number one, and the main thing, is don't leave assets directly to your special needs child. And as Stephen mentioned, because anything over $2,000 in total will disqualify them. And if you don't do any estate planning or you don't do any planning, that's going to be the default, and they will inherit your assets. The second thing, and I think it's fairly common, is I often meet people that say, you know, my special needs son has a couple of great siblings, and I'm just going to leave everything to them. And while that's effective in terms of not disqualifying them for benefits, it's a bad idea, and for three reasons. Number one, let's say they inherit the money. There's no guarantee that they're going to spend it right, and there's no guarantee that they might not fall upon hard times and just spend down the money or become disabled and not have disability insurance, so not a good idea. Second scenario is, let's say your typically developing child inherits the money, gets married, they commingle assets, they don't have a prenup agreement, and get divorced. What's going to happen? Half of it goes to the divorcing spouse. Similarly, same couple, don't get divorced, have kids, commingle assets, and they die prematurely. What's going to happen? It's going to go probably all to their children and none of it to your special needs son or daughter. So that's, just don't do it, okay? It's probably simple, but I really recommend not doing that. Okay, so a question that I am often asked and is very difficult to answer is, how much do they need from private resources? And it's a difficult question to answer, but I think sometimes still a useful exercise to go through. And the way that you do that is through, I don't mean to get too technical, but just through a present value calculation of trying to determine what their future needs and cash flows are and bring that down to a current dollar amount. So the first step you have to do when you do that is determine how much you're paying out of pocket. What are their current expenses? What are they getting from SSI and public benefits? And then you can determine what you're paying out of pocket. As Stephen said, you know, in planning in general, I like to be a little bit conservative, but in this case, I would think even more conservative because, as Stephen said, you know, our benefits can be more robust or less robust in the future, almost certainly less robust. And you also want to think about one-time expenses. Are you going to buy them a house in the future, or is there something else you want to plan for? And then, of course, you have to factor in inflation, rate of return, and tax rate. And so I did just a sample, and I guess you can see this pretty well. So in this example, I assumed that you'd have to pay, or you were paying $1,000 out of pocket with a $500,000 home purchase 25 years from now. And assuming 3% inflation, 5% return on your investments, and a 16.5% tax rate, which is probably a little low, to fund all that in present day dollars is almost $750,000. Okay, and so of course you're not going to be able, you don't have a crystal ball. If we did it, it would be easier. But I think this can give you some benefit to sort of frame what you might need, and it also might help you determine how much life insurance you need. So speaking of life insurance, I'll talk about an idea that is something I almost always talk about for my clients that have special needs dependents, and that's second to die life insurance. And so the first thing to think about is, what is the purpose of this? The purpose of this is solely to leave money for your special needs child that is guaranteed, liquid, and tax-free. That's the only purpose. It's not for your spouse. It's probably not, well, you actually can use it for your other kids, but that's the purpose. And, you know, it doesn't really matter if you don't believe in life insurance. What you really need to do is you need to evaluate this as a tool for the purpose I just talked about. And I will say that for reasonably healthy people, on a risk-adjusted basis and on a tax-adjusted basis, there's no better investment. I walk the walk. I do the things that I'm talking about personally. And so if you think about, you know, again, this is tax-free. If somebody or a trust inherits something from a 401k or an IRA, and they take in a lump sum, which you don't necessarily have to do, but if they take in a lump sum and it's a $500,000 value, they'll end up with about $250,000. So again, life insurance, you get the whole thing. Comparing, again, it's risk-free, so you want to compare this to other risk-free investments. Probably the best thing is a 10-year U.S. Treasury, or you can go a little bit longer. In October, 10-year U.S. Treasuries were 1.6%, just went up after the election to about 2.4%, but you can see for guaranteed investments, you're not getting much of a return. And so then the last thing, sort of the way to frame this is, like I sometimes term big mistake, little mistake. And the big mistake, in my opinion, is you don't do something like this, and you think you're going to do fabulous with all your other investments, but unforeseen things happen and you don't have this, and your special needs child ends up with nothing. The little mistake is you do fantastic, you had the life insurance, and oh darn, they ended up with some extra liquid money, okay, which can help in different things. So I have an example, which I know is a little bit hard to read, but I just did an illustration that, frankly, a couple of years ago, but on two healthy 50-year-olds, and by the way, I think I may have skipped this, just if it wasn't clear, second to die life insurance pays only after the second death, typically of a couple. And therefore, because it's the second death, the premiums tend to be less than if it's on a single death. And that's why second to die can be a good way to go. And not always. For different people, it might be a different situation. But just to kind of illustrate, two 50-year-olds in good health, $500,000 of life insurance. The premium is just under $3,000 a year, $2,996. I use Prudential in this case because you want to use a large, highly rated company. And I have, what you see on the right is internal rate of return. So if the couple died really early, after 10 years, the annualized rate of return is almost 50%, and the tax equivalent yield, assuming a 35% tax rate, is 76% annualized. But that's pretty young. So if you push it out now to say the second person dies at age 69, those numbers are almost 18%, and on a tax-adjusted basis, almost 27%. And now let's go out to age 89, which might be realistic. The annualized return is 6%, and the tax equivalent rate is above 9% annualized risk-free. Okay, so that's why I think this is a really smart table leg to have if you have a special needs child. Okay, and I think I'm doing okay on time, and I think at this point, 8 more minutes, but okay, I'm just being nice to Christina, and if you have any questions afterwards, I guess we'll, oh, okay, should I take questions now? Yeah, that's fine. Okay, I see a question over there. Can you go up to the mic, please?
Hi. Since I get to the mic first. So would you recommend to increase the death benefit if it's so efficient?
It really depends on the person's situation, and I say that a lot. Ultimately, you can do a calculation similar to the one you saw earlier to say, and sort of weave that into your overall planning to see how much death benefit they should have. But you have to weigh what you think they need, plus do you have the resources to pay for the premium. In a very general term, yes, I would do more than $500,000 in a very general term. Yes, sir.
So maybe this is more for the prior presentation. At the end of the day, it sounds like the parent's worth is irrelevant if it's planned correctly. Even Bill Gates' kid could get benefits.
Yeah, I mean, once again, and I would actually suggest, I know I keep pushing Jim's presentation, but Jim and I have worked with some very fabulously wealthy people who absolutely under no circumstances wanted their kids on benefits. Guess what we did? We put them on benefits, and it depends on what it is. And like all the things we're going to talk about, these are just tools, and what we really need to do is really focus on the objectives. And I think this is one reason why having knowledgeable counsel that can help, and team planning, that's really the way to go. Now, for many of us, you know, it's not that big a deal, and it really depends on the situation.
Okay, and I just want to remind this time that I still have, Christina has to get in on here, so still continue?
Yeah, we can actually, let's do Q&A at the end.
Yeah.
Okay,
Is that okay?
sure.
I think that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
I don't get to ask the question. It's really quick. Does the parent the retired parent have to be drawing the SSDI in order for the special needs child to be drawing the SSDI?
If they're doing for SSDI, yes, they do, right? So, and and as Christina's coming up here, you know how you get this thing from Social Security that says, hey, if we don't go broke, here's what you're going to get. Take that number, divide it in half while you're alive, when you retire, divide it by 3/4 when you pass away, and that'll give you a pretty good idea of what's going to happen.
Thank you.
So I'm 4'11", and podiums, you guys all won't see me, so I hope it's okay if I actually stand here. And I don't have a presentation either for this, so I don't know if we're able to turn the screen off or if it's distracting, if you don't mind. I'm going to have a more detailed presentation during one of the breakout sessions later this afternoon. And so, as Jill said, my name's Christina Elliott. I'm the Executive Director for the California ABLE Act Board. And just a little bit about me. Prior to the treasurer asking me to take on this new role, I was the Executive Director of a retirement plan, state-run, newly enacted, and my background is in investments, in pensions, public benefits. And I'm not an attorney, and I'm not a financial planner. So all of the questions that you probably have for Steve and for Jonathan, I get as well. And my answer is always, I'm not a financial advisor and I'm not an attorney. And we, encourage people to go and get advice from qualified people who can answer detailed questions about their unique situations. So the ABLE Act. A couple years ago, in 2014, the president signed the ABLE Act into law. It was a 10-year effort, and I can't say that I was involved with that, but as I've been in this role since July, it's really been eye-opening to learn all that folks like yourself, children, and other people with disabilities throughout the United States, the various obstacles that people have had to overcome just to live a low quality of life many times. And so what the ABLE Act is, they are savings accounts that the federal government authorized states to start up. So states then went and had to run their own legislation to create these accounts in their own respective states. So ABLE accounts allow people with disabilities to save up to $100,000 in assets, not income. As we heard, there's a difference between those two. Up to $100,000 without losing their federal or state benefits. So SSI, SSDI. And then, as you all know, here in California, and as the two previous presenters touched on, California has a lot of really wonderful programs for people, Californians, to take advantage of. Californians with disabilities and folks like yourself, parents of children with disabilities, which creates a unique situation for us here in California as we start to begin our process of opening accounts. So we passed our law last year in 2015. We have a general fund loan. We don't have an annual budget. We're not run on state tax dollars. It's called self-sustaining, so there will be fees associated with these accounts. And I'll get to that in a little bit, and then I'll also, touch on that in more detail. So the California ABLE Act generally mirrors the federal law. And while we talk about it as an asset building program, you can make qualified disability expenses. And it's written into both the federal and state laws very generally. So transportation, housing, rent, mortgage, legal fees, funeral and burial costs. It's quite an extensive list. And the state law mirrors, of course, there is some limitations. So you have to have become disabled before the age of 26. And that's a hard conversation to have in certain crowds. I don't think that for many of you that is an issue, but it is something that, we're working on maybe increasing, hopefully, in the future. The other thing that is sometimes concerning to folks is that when you go and look up eligibility for ABLE accounts, qualifying for SSI, SSDI automatically qualifies you for ABLE accounts. And sometimes folks with autism and other developmental disabilities, mental health, that isn't something that they're taking a benefit from. So there are lists on the Social Security Administration website that list out Down syndrome, autism, and other developmental disabilities. And then you can get a qualified physician to write you basically a doctor's note that we will not collect, but you keep for your records for your child. And it will suffice to qualify you for an ABLE account. And I want to back up because a lot of people confuse us with a benefit. So Steve mentioned us in his presentation, but we are not a public benefit. Does anyone in the room have if you have a typical child, do you have a 529 account for your child? So the Scholar Share College Savings Plan, we share federal IRC code with them. We're the 529A plan for people with disabilities. So, education costs are something you can spend your money on. They're going to function like a checking and a savings. And so they're very unique, but sometimes we get confused and we get questions about specifics and benefits that we can't answer because we really are just a savings account with a checking feature. And, we can't offer counseling services with respect to your benefits. And we're really trying to learn all of the benefits that are offered to all of our population in California. And it's huge. So we decided not to open quickly. We're taking our time this year, and we are spending time with public agencies that offer public benefits, both at the federal and state level here in California. So SSA is on our advisory council. There's 16 other state agencies that are on our council. Because the worst thing that we could imagine is that people open ABLE accounts and then lose their benefit because the field representatives don't know what ABLE is. It's very new. It's even more new in California. So we want to be able to train and educate the field staff that qualify people for whatever benefit that they're seeking. And so we're trying to partner with them and be proactive. The other thing about the ABLE accounts is that you can save up to $100,000, and it's called tax advantaged, or you don't pay taxes on them. So there are a lot of delineations between, and again, I'm not a estate planner, I'm not a financial advisor, but there are some similarities between special needs planning, the trusts, and ABLE accounts. But we really believe that they complement each other because of the way that you can spend the money in the ABLE accounts. Don't want to miss anything. I'm going to go into our vision and mission and our values more this afternoon. But as Steve mentioned, prior to this, you couldn't have more than $2,000 in assets without your SSI being suspended. From what I understand, SSI is suspended when you have more than $2,000, not completely stopped, meaning you can try to get it started again. But from what we've heard and, speaking at events like this, it's not that easy to just start your benefits back up, whether it's SSI or even some of the state programs. So again, we're really trying to be cognizant of the importance of benefits to you and your children and to those that we're going to serve with these accounts as well. So I was under the impression I had 10 minutes. Do I have more than that? Oh, okay. So one thing that we've seen so far is, well, I should mention that there are other states that have gone forward that have ABLE accounts available today. So you could log on to your internet on your phone and open an ABLE account in probably 10 minutes with Ohio, Nebraska, Tennessee, Michigan. Oregon is going to be opening accounts soon. There's a 10-state consortium that's opening up in January or so. And again, these states do not have the public benefit programs, entitlement programs that California has, but many, many Californians have ABLE accounts right now. And we're hearing good, we're hearing concerns. Low-income housing is something that we're trying to really work with HUD on. For those of you, and as Steve mentioned, housing is a concern that many people have with children with special needs. And the way that HUD views assets is any income earned on an asset, or any interest earned is considered income. And the way that the federal statute is written and the way that our state statute is written, we don't believe that that is true. Now, HUD hasn't released any guidelines, so there's a lot of gray area with many different things with ABLE accounts. There's, like I mentioned, a handful of states with accounts available, and there are only 3,000 people with accounts right now across the United States. Here in California, we have 4 million, potentially 4 million people who could take advantage. When we apply some algorithms, it's probably 1 to 2 million for sure. With the age cap, it's hard to do that math because, age of onset is what it's called. It's hard to determine, especially with mental health. That isn't well documented. And so why aren't people opening accounts? Well, again, when you talk with people, people don't trust government, first thing. I am the government telling you, hey, you can open an account and you're not going to lose your benefits, and you roll your eyes and say, yeah, right. And we get that. Again, another reason that we are not open here in California, because there's a lot to lose for you guys, for your children. Like I said, we don't want you to lose your benefits. We don't want your children to lose their benefits. We want you to feel confident in what we're doing, and there's far too much at stake here in California. The other reason we think that uptake is slow is the Medicaid recovery piece. If you read the federal legislation, our state statute is kind of silent on it, but the federal statute says that upon the beneficiary's death, that's another difference. For ABLE accounts, your child will be the beneficiary, and you, as their parent legal guardian, will open it for them. For the 529 college savings, that's not the way that it's set up. So that's another difference. But upon the death of a beneficiary, the Medicaid, and here in California, Medi-Cal, can claw back or recover any money spent on that person on Medi-Cal costs from the time that they opened their ABLE account, so not prior to that, but from the time they open their ABLE account to the time of death. And so, again, I don't know, I'm not an expert on benefits or Medicare or Medicaid, but I do realize that for some that's a huge, huge deal, and for others, their children aren't on Medi-Cal. And so there's this widespread of concern about that recovery piece. And so I think that's another reason that people are slow to take it up. But then you get back to what are ABLE accounts for? Yes, they're to accumulate assets, not lose your benefits. But we do, again, believe that they are in complement to special needs trusts. They would not replace them. What I know about special needs trusts can fit on a really small Post-it note. But what I do know is that there's different types. You guys probably know way more than me too, of course. And so, there's some that Medi-Cal can recover from. There's some that they can't, and I'm probably saying that wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, Stephen. But I think that it would be really important when you think about setting up your ABLE account to consider that and think about how you can plan for your child's future using ABLE as a tool. And I'll go back to this again, where we are a financial services tool. We are not a public benefit, and we really hope to be something that is useful to you as you plan the future of your child or children. But there are, some things that might make you wary about opening accounts. I'll get to this again more this afternoon, but we really hope to make some progress with the recovery piece. Pennsylvania passed a law that said they will not recover from ABLE accounts in Pennsylvania for Pennsylvanians. We're working with Medi-Cal, Medicaid folks here in the state. They're on our advisory council as well, of course. We're having some interesting conversations with the recovery chief on what legislation would look like that we here in California could do something similar. But it would take legislation. It's going to take a lot of coordination, and we don't know what that outcome will be, but I can tell you that we're aware of the concern, and we're really working to try to see if we can make some movement there. jumping back to advocacy, that's where folks like yourself representing, advocating for your children are really important when we start doing stuff like this. If you think that that's an important thing for California to do, I would hope that you would join us, send letters to your legislature. If we need to do some more work at the federal level, we'll work with groups like Autism Society of San Francisco to get some movement on issues that are concerning to people around ABLE accounts. It's a baby, it's brand new, it's 2 years old. There's what it looks like now at the federal and here and at the state level is not what it's going to look like in 10 years. What it started off 10 years ago, well, 12 years ago now, what it started out as a legislative initiative is not what it ended up being. There was never an age cap when they first started talking about ABLE accounts. And so as politics play out, things, change. And, it's going to take a lot of work to make this better. But we do believe that it's a really good first step. And the legislative intent is kind of a term we say, is that people will be able to have better quality of life through the spending that they'll be able to do. We have a harder time saying what you can't spend your money on than what you can. And so we can talk more about that later during my presentation, or now, if you guys want to ask questions about that. So let me make sure that I've hit what I wanted to hit, and hopefully we can answer more questions. I'll just end with our timeline. So like I said, we're trying to really create a program that is serving the population that it's supposed to serve. The first thing I learned when I got this job was that I need to learn about benefits really quickly, but I also realized that for the people with disabilities in California and throughout the United States, forever, people like myself, policymakers, legislators have gone forward and made policy and laws and procedures and high to low level for people with disabilities and never included them in the process. And so that was resoundingly clear when we first started having meetings with parents with people with disabilities. They're sick of people going and making programs for them and never asking them what this program is, if it's going to help them. So we have a survey. I've sent you guys the link. I'd love it if you took it. We want to get some demographic data about your children, about our population, but we also want to know what your concerns are about ABLE with the information that you know, why you want to open an account, why you don't, and then what types of features and benefits would you like us to offer here in California? There's a debit card option in Ohio. So you load money onto your debit card and go make your qualified disability purchase. For someone who has MS, which isn't this crowd, that's a nightmare because it feels very vulnerable on their neck because their functionality is different. So we really need to learn all of the needs of our population and make sure that we design this in a way that's going to serve everyone as best we can, given limited resources. So with that, I will say that we are bringing on our consultant this winter. They'll be helping us design our RFP for an investment manager and administrator. We will be contracting with a financial services firm. I won't be doing the investments for you guys. We'll, have investment spreads. Hopefully we'll have a lot of really useful tools as you start to build your program for your child. And then we plan to open accounts summer next year. So I'm happy to answer questions now or during my breakout session this afternoon.
Yeah, we have time for Q&A for the entire panel. Thank you so much, Christina. So if you have a question, just line up at either of the microphones. We're not going to, if you mind, because we need the audio feeds, which is why we need you at the mics. All right, please go ahead.
With the Medi-Cal or Medicare,
Can you speak a little bit more into the mic?
with the Medi-Cal clawback, if a child has used, let's say, $100,000, and their ABLE account only has $10,000 or $20,000, is there any avenues right now that would allow Medi-Cal or Medicare to seek out the rest of the money beyond the ABLE account?
Well, I can only speak for ABLE accounts, but yes, right now, if that were the situation, Medi-Cal recovery could recover whatever's left in the account. They wouldn't go further than what's in the ABLE account.
Okay.
So they wouldn't,
All right.
right.
Okay, thank you.
The thing I would add for that, though, and once again, when you understand it, it's something not to be afraid of. So the fact that there's a clawback or a payback or whatever, as long as you understand how it works, it should work. So if you had a situation, for instance, there are some things that you can use an ABLE account for instance, for burial expenses and things like that you can't use for other tools. So it's like the more you understand, the better. And then as far as this, because we probably don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but going back to my YouTube channel, I actually have a video on this here. And so there may be other places they may recover from, but that's something that's going to be played out as time goes on.
We have a lot of questions, so we're going to make this
Yeah.
like speed dating. All right,
Okay.
Amy.
My question is, can you, any of you, give me an example of how a special needs trust and an ABLE account would complement each other?
Oh, I certainly can. I'll tell you one of the things, and I'm sure that Christina's going to cover this a lot. Remember I told you this stupid thing that if you pay for housing for your child, you get penalized by $264.34? With the ABLE account, the way it's set up, and you have to do it precisely. So for instance, I've been setting up ABLE accounts for my beneficiaries, and here's how it works. Housing does not reduce the benefits. So literally, here's the situation. I was working, so if you have a special needs trust and it pays the rent directly, let's say it's $1,000 a month, it's going to reduce the benefits by $264 and change. If you take, and the trust allows you to pay the ABLE account $1,000 a month, and then the ABLE account pays the rent, no reduction in benefits, $3,000 a year. So does that have a value to you? Go team.
Thank you.
Okay, please, go ahead.
Hi, I have a question regarding the ABLE account. So I understand there's this $100,000 exemption for purposes of the Special Needs Trust. Excuse me. What happens when the principal and income, which accumulates tax-free in the account, exceeds $100,000 for purposes of the tax-free advantage of the interest?
And that's a good question. So depending on what type of investment you choose, you could earn a lot of money quickly if the market's doing well or vice versa. But interest counts towards that $100,000 cap. So we would make sure that we set up safeguards where we would stop any kind of, because it's like, I forget which John or Steve alluded to, is that there's this $14,000 gift limit. So it's $14,000 a year you can put into your ABLE account. That is not including the interest. The interest, though, will accumulate towards the $100,000.
Right. Well, my question is, after you've reached $100,000,
Yeah.
do you still get tax advantages on the interest earned?
Yes.
So
And here's the other thing to think about as you're doing this. For many of you in this room, by the time you hit this, they're not going to be on SSI anyway.
But I
They're
will
going to be
add,
on a
though,
different
any
program.
additional contributions above the $100,000, let's say you decide to do that because they're not on SSI, like Steve said, that's where we're still learning how the IRS would treat that. We believe that, yes, you would still have tax advantage,
So I
yes.
could just continue accumulating interest on that account
Yeah.
tax-free
Yes.
forever? Okay.
Yeah. Like an
I
IRA.
think you just have to be aware of the cap, and once you get close to the 100,000, you're not going to make any more contributions.
But we would, the interest would still continue to accumulate. You just wouldn't be able to have any more contributions. So we would stop it unless you wanted to continue contributing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's go on. That was a great question.
Thanks.
Please.
If your child has a self-funded special needs trust, could you use those funds to purchase a second-to-die life insurance policy?
Probably not. And especially if it's under court supervision. Here under California, the department really frowns on that kind of thing.
Okay,
So, and you would have to make it payable back to the trust anyway, so probably not. There might be a circumstance where you might.
Could those funds be used to fund an ABLE account?
We're waiting, we've been told by Social Security that we will get a POMS, which is the regulations. We'll get clarity on that coming up. Verbally, we're being told by the person that writes and I'm actually on a committee that works with them directly here, that you'll be able to take the self-settled trust. And let's go back to what I was telling you. For instance, paying for the housing, that you will be. It's not in writing yet, so hang tight. This is a thing in development, and I agree with Christina. The story isn't over at this point.
All right, let's move on, please.
I have two questions. May I ask them? For Stephen, you mentioned the primary issue is with who you select as a trustee. So I'd like for you to expound on that.
I think because of time, I would love to, and I'm not above going on and on. I'm going to have a specific section on this, so that's something that would be really hard to cover in this amount of time. It's incredibly
Session 5.
important. It's incredibly important. If you're thinking about opening up a special needs trust, I think the biggest issue you have to look at is the management team.
Okay, thank you. And for Christina, if you have a 529 plan already that you established when the child was 1,
Yeah.
and now you realize it's not going to probably be utilized, that could go back to your owner, which would be me, or it could be used for their grandchildren, other people, sibling grandchildren's, nieces, nephews, et cetera. Is the same situation going to apply to the $100,000 in the ABLE?
There's legislation at the federal level to allow more transferability between accounts. Right now, it would go to another 529A account, and there's a proposal, and I don't know if it's moved recently, but it's looking good to allow transfer between a 529 and a 529A.
Oh, there is something
Yeah,
in there for
but
that.
it's not signed yet.
Okay.
Good question.
Thank you very much.
Okay, please.
Hi, I have a question about date of onset and how that impacts eligibility for the ABLE account.
Sure.
So if your date of onset was before 26 and established by medical documentation, but you became SSDI eligible after 26, which one do they go by?
The age of onset. So, and let's say that you didn't get treated. So we'll use mental health, a mental health issue. I know that doesn't completely apply here, but typically with women, if with schizophrenia, age of onset begins at puberty often, but treatment and diagnosis doesn't come until 40 or later. You get your doctor to write a qualified physician to write you a doctor's note showing that there was behavioral issues, whatever they say to prove age of onset. Now you retain that. We will never ask for a doctor's note. You will sign under penalty of perjury when you sign up. But again, we're not a public benefit. We aren't going to qualify you for ABLE accounts. You will sign up, and we will trust you have the doctor's note.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Hello, I have a question regarding SSI benefits and potential loss of them. For an individual who wants to be very independent, who is making over $1,000 right now, spending most of the money, and doesn't understand SSI, doesn't understand that if you sign up for 401k, you may lose SSI. And who do I turn to that they can actually explain? Because, at 22, really don't want to listen to parents.
I absolutely, and maybe Jim will cover this later in his session, disabilitybenefits101.org is the best resource. I doubt if there's 2 days that go by that I don't go to that. And it has all sorts of ways to work through the system. Once again, working in a lot of cases is the path to independence, right? So if we could turn your child into a taxpayer, that is your child's path to independence. The rules are so wonky and crazy and hard to get your head around. Disabilitybenefits101.org, db101.org.
Also, who can I go to together to help me and him to explain to him?
That's a good, to explain to them?
Yes.
How about Jim Hike?
I'm sorry?
How about Jim?
Our
Jim
next
Hike.
speaker.
Actually, Jim is one of the leading folks in California when it comes to this kind of thing, and there's getting to be a growing number of consultants that work with this, because once again, trying to get your arms around these rules sometimes can be a little daunting.
Okay, let's move on. We have so many questions. Fada.
Thank you. Hey Dale. So there is a state contribution to SSI?
Yes.
Okay. So,
Although our tightwad governor won't increase it, but anyway.
yeah. Okay. So he won't increase it, but we have, for example, IHSS, different counties pay differently because the cost of living is higher in different counties. If you live in like these counties that I'll never visit, like Modoc and Mono counties, maybe they don't need as high of a, income. But is there a place where we can, advocate? I've seen advocacy can change a lot of things. If we can advocate on the state level and try to force them to, increase it, because if we live in counties like Santa Clara County, you live in Palo Alto, you can't live on $800. Why are you shaking your head? I've seen advocacy do crazy things.
Oh, yeah, no, I think the system we have is absolutely antiquated. It needs a complete overhaul. It makes no sense whatsoever. It is not what was promised here. And I think that advocacy is the answer, and this is the time to do it. So that's why organizations like this are so important. This system sucks, you know?
All right.
Which keeps me in business too, by the way.
We have the
If they
title
fixed
for
it, I'd
next
be out
year's
of business,
conference.
so,
All right.
yeah.
This is gonna suck.
Okay, we're gonna, we
Power
have so
to the
many
people.
questions. David?
So I suspect this is also something that's best addressed later in the afternoon in the panel about
Speak
trustees.
into the mic.
Oh, another question about trustees. But just real quickly, can the trustee coordinate between an ABLE account and the special needs trust, or is that something's best served by someone here?
Can and should, and I think that's the thing with this is that, look at, just for the folks in this audience, do you remember what your life was like before you had a child with a disability? And you probably don't, okay? It changes your life, and it's an education process, and you're kind of in a graduate program today, okay? And it's the same thing. When we have trustees and folks that are in charge of these things, we need folks that not only can manage the money and that kind of thing, but really are aware of ABLE accounts, of 250% working disabled programs, of past plans, of all these things. It is not a simple system. It is a patchwork of loosely put together systems. But the thing is that to be a good advocate and to get the best out of it, you need folks who really have dedicated themselves, not just to keeping your kid on a welfare program, but what are these tools? And so that's one reason why this new tool, for me, this new toy of the ABLE account, and my friend Robert Fleming says it's the gift that keeps giving. And I'll tell you, every week I discover another use of this thing I never thought of.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, please.
Hi, I have an 18-year-old son who is diagnosed on the higher end at 17, and we did a trust when my kids were infants. And, you know, I don't know how to plan for a special needs trust because I really don't know if he's going to be able to function independently. We're still in that discovery phase. Can he go to college? Can he maintain a job? I'm wondering what kind of advice you would give in a situation like that.
Well, if this is okay, go ahead, John.
Well, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, here's the thing, and we go back to the trustee question. This is why I'm so jazzed up about trustees, and I see some trustees out in the room. The job, some people think the job of the trustee is to keep your kid on a welfare program. How many of these people in this room is your utmost desire is to keep your kid on a welfare program? And please don't put your hand up, okay? So it's just a tool and nothing more than that. So the trust should be flexible enough that if your child, maybe I have a niece named Erica who has Down syndrome. She has a lot of things that she can do, but managing money is not on the list of things that we can do. I really would like her to get off of benefits. She's working in that kind of thing. So the trust we designed for her is something that can toggle on and toggle off depending on the situation. And the thing is, not only do we need to make sure that the document is done correctly, but we need to make sure the management team really understands the whole community movement, which is it's not physically moving people in the community, it's being part of the community. Like my mentor, Ed Roberts, said, is all we do is move people from large institutions to isolated group homes. What did we do? Nothing, okay? The whole thing about this is with your child, if your child can transition into being independent or gets into a situation where the benefits aren't important, then the trust should really function as that support to continue with providing that advocacy and making them as independent as possible. And if that means getting them off of the benefits merry-go-round, I'm okay by that. That the objective is not to put them on welfare programs. It's a necessary evil in many situations. You got to understand the price of this. You cannot be independent on SSI. It is not possible, okay? It's not built to make you independent. And our goal should be for our disabled loved ones to be as independent as possible.
Okay, Connie?
Hi. I understand that the CalABLE, it might be rolling out at the end of next year, but I also understand the feds have to approve it, so it might even be, or they don't, okay.
No.
So the question is can you open an ABLE account in another state, and then if you want to, reopen it in California?
You'll need to close your account and roll the money into ABLE in California if you want to do that. But yes, you can transfer funds between accounts. You can only have, beneficiary may only have one account though. So you can't have multiple accounts throughout the United States.
I probably helped open 50 accounts, and most of those we're waiting until Christina and her crew get done, and then we will be moving the vast majority of those to California, because we're Californians.
Bob?
If you have a special needs trust already, would you encourage opening up an ABLE account as well? Or are there, for instance, can ABLE accounts be used for housing, which theoretically they aren't for special needs?
I would urge you to, the future that I see for the vast majority of my clients is they're going to have a special needs trust and an ABLE account. Should you? And it's all about education, okay? So part of that is you'd want to factor in the payback, the clawback, or whatever. Not that that should be the deciding factor. You should factor in capacity issues here as far as that's concerned. And so it's like everything else. Nothing in disability is easy. People are always looking for simple solutions to complex problems, and I wish that's what we had. That's not what has been dished out to us here. In most cases, especially if you don't have major capacity issues, and there are all sorts of ways to get around the clawback, even if it turns out that it stays in place. Knowledge is the key. There isn't a simple answer, yes or no. Anybody who gives you a yes or no answer, they're giving you the wrong answer.
Can special needs trust assets be transferred to an ABLE
A
account?
third-party trust or estate planning trust, I don't see a problem in the world. A court-ordered or self-settled trust, I am trustee of 160. We are opening up 20 ABLE accounts, which will eventually be transferred to California. We're using one of those other states, Ohio, here, but eventually we will here. And we're doing it very cautiously, but I'm taking a small risk with those folks. In a third-party trust, I wouldn't give it a second thought.
All right, Desiree.
I'm a host home provider to a young man on the spectrum. We got him a job, yay. We opened up an ABLE account, yay. I called to see if we need to be reporting SSI and to SSI, SSDI of his income that he's making in his new job. Yes, I was told by Social Security in the state that I live in that if he exceeds a certain amount of income a month, even if the money in the ABLE account, if he puts all the money in there, that he could lose Medicaid.
Yes.
That he could lose Medicaid.
What state are you in?
Colorado.
Yeah, so every state, I didn't touch on this, but every state has a Medicaid limit listed out in their own state statute. So that was another authority that the federal government gave to states to determine. Here in California, there is no limit in our statute. So technically, well, there's no limit. I think that the limit in Ohio is 460 something for Ohioans. But even if you have an account in California, and we don't have a limit here, your limit in Colorado will still apply as a Colorado resident having that ABLE asset. So all of the laws, this is where it's a little confusing.
So ABLE does not protect, does not protect the means test with
For
Medicaid in Colorado?
No.
So anyone in Colorado will not be able to have a certain amount of money, even if it's in an ABLE account?
In your question.
Yeah. Say that one more time?
I think there's a confusion in your question. By statute, until the ABLE account hits whatever the maximum is for that state for a traditional 529 plan, you could keep putting funds into it, and until it hits that amount, you'll still qualify for Medicaid.
Yeah.
As far as the money you're earning, and let's say you're putting it into the ABLE account, does it change anything? And no, it doesn't. But see, here's the power of this. And I get clients like this. If you haven't noticed, I'm very into disabled people working. I think it's a good thing to do. The problem is they work and they keep going over that $2,000 limit, and it just gets hard to deal with because they can't build up any money. One of the powerful things that an ABLE account could do is you can now build your assets above the $2,000 limitation without any further penalty. So one of the examples I have on one of my videos.
I understand that.
Yeah.
But now I'm being told that that is not true.
You're
that
wrong.
if-
They're wrong.
They're wrong.
They're wrong.
Thank you. So putting the money into ABLE will not take away his Medicaid after he starts
No.
earning more than $2,000, I think it was $2,300 a month.
So this is the problem. Another reason why we're not open in California is that SSA folks at the field level, I mean, we're working with like the top people in SSA. So they're in Chicago. We're talking about processes and procedures for reporting, because states have to report to SSA on the first of every month, account balances and names. Those processes are not created yet for SSA in each of the states. Each state has its own staff level, regions, and reporting ways and means. So it's really, really complicated. And so again, to hurry and open an ABLE account is not a bad thing, but there are this lack of knowledge, this lack of training, not just at the federal level, but for state agencies as well.